Hi again, I'm Michael, and I think this may follow on more nicely than anticipated, but I hope you can be the judge of that. So I lead the Mobilisation Lab, and we have the privilege of getting to work with social change campaigners and their organizations all around the world to enable them and equip them to be more effective, not only at storytelling, but in people-powered campaigning and enabling the full potential of what individuals everywhere can do. I'm actually go back for a second on this because I think it's going to get, thanks. And to enable them to drive systems change, so long-term social change on human rights, the environment, whatever they're working on. And storytelling, of course, is a huge part of that. And I want to make a distinction here in the short time I have between storytelling for individual inspiration and action and mobilization and communication to inspire people to act or learn about something, with storytelling in a systems change context. That's something that has only recently become more clear to us as something that is essential for us to understand in doing effective advocacy work. So I have this tool I'll show you in a second that we like. You may have others. I know a lot of you here have storytelling communications backgrounds. And so, kind of like Michael said up front, we all know a lot about what's a good story, right? We hear stories all the time about inspiring characters overcoming challenges to achieve some kind of worthy outcome. And ideally, we're doing that, we're elevating those stories as organizations, or we're stepping back and we're thinking about who's the storyteller. Is it us, or is it the people who are most impacted or have the most compelling stories to tell? But we see that as really useful in, perhaps in fundraising, perhaps in inspiring action, right? In engaging and connecting with others to understand what the issue is, right? Why should I care? That is different than in the systems change work, where we're looking for these stories that connect and bind an entire society. Did any of you, I don't think I heard it when we went around, did any of you read the Sapiens book? I'm only in the first chapter, but it already has covered this topic. And he talks about the one unique thing about our species, right, is that we can believe in these big myths, that we have the capability to be connected and subsume our individual interests beneath these larger stories. And you guys can correct me if I'm not saying this well enough, but that can lead us to following a religion or defining a country where otherwise there's no reason that we would all align ourselves around some kind of cooperative arrangement, right? And so these stories basically are unique to our species and then define us as an entire society. And that's the stuff that often we have to change, because some of those stories are not serving us, or they're unjust or unsustainable. And actually, if you don't mind switching to that slide again, this is a visual that we use to talk about these different layers in society or in a system. And so my experience in advocacy, working with different advocacy groups for years now, is that, and I was part of this for many years working on climate, is that we focus on this structures layer, right? So how many of you work at some kind of advocacy or policy-oriented group, right? Or have a policy shop, right? Or do research and want to change laws, right? So that's what we do up here in the blue, and that's essential, right? We need laws that serve that reflect our interests. We need protections. We need institutions. We need economic systems that work for everyone, right? But also in society, we know that we have these mental modes. And so I'll use an example to better illustrate this, because I think the marriage equality campaign here in the US is often cited as a great example of successfully changing this cultural layer in order to also achieve lasting, durable change to get the policy change, but then also lasting social change. And we now are seeing that it's now a bipartisan, this is a lasting change where we can't, and durable in the sense that we almost aren't able to go backwards. The marriage equality fight has been so successful that attacks are sustained, right? We don't lose, we're not able to shift, it's not shifting public opinion anymore. And so I'm throwing this out as a hopefully useful framework as you start thinking, or we get into some smaller groups and talk about your own examples. But the marriage equality part of this, in my mind, is that you know, a lot of people cited after in the post campaign reflections cited things like. Well, actually, I'll ask you, what were some of the cultural influences that you've heard about in the marriage equality campaign that had an impact?
Will and Grace.
Exactly, yeah. Will and Grace, Ellen DeGeneres, right? And all these we just talked about, you know, the Spotify campaigns and music and the role of all the cultural influencers in society that I think we, especially in this town, completely ignore when we make our plans or think about. And it's actually, we like having it in a big chunk in the middle because we're pretty well trained to think about what kind of laws and policies and structures that we need to change in the system, but we forget often this equally, if not more, important work to change the stories that bind us or that define our society. So we changed the mental modes in society collectively around how we think about what is marriage, what is love, what is partnership, who can, you know, those norms in some societies, right? Here, and we can certainly contrast the difference. Many of you work in many different locations around the world, and you'll see the difference. Oh, that's my time. And I think we can contrast that right now with climate. For example, like I said, I know we spent years trying to pass bold federal climate legislation here in the U.S. without thinking about the kinds of stories that are now emerging, and I think coming to the fore about what is mutual survival, what is a right to, you know, who has more rights to exist to survive as a species on the planet than others. I'm not sure exactly what all the cultural norms will be coming out of this, but we're seeing new things like Extinction Rebellion and the way young people are talking about climate from a human perspective and a human stories perspective through the Sunrise Movement and other efforts as very different than some of the initiative campaigning we saw less than a decade ago. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Lots of interesting conversation. We could talk about what does an organization, or the questions I would pose to you as we go into a small group is, you know, what is enabling or in the way of your organization being able to think and work at this systems level when it comes to your own storytelling work. And one resource I will leave with you is the Narrative Initiative. They are friends and partners and allies of ours, and they do great work and put out a lot more content and information on some of the stuff I just talked about. That's it for me. Thanks.